Yeah, legally, with regard to the relationship between our community and the police, legally, the police are not required to participate in evictions. That is supposed to be done by the marshal's office. Legally, a person who can prove they've lived somewhere 30 days has a right to due process. The reality of the situation is that all of this is very elastic. What I always say to people in CB trainings is the operative word with police is can. They can do anything they want to do. Does that mean they will? No, but they can. You shouldn't assume that because the Constitution says you have certain rights that the police are going to respect them, or any other legal paper when they're on the street with you. Also, the city can tell police to do things that might not be legal, and you can argue about that in court later, but you know, if they've bashed your head in, evicted your building, or done whatever else they're trying to do, that may be all they really wanted to do anyways. So the fact that you get charges dropped, you know, or even financial compensation for their behavior may not be that relative to them. After all, the money you're getting is money you gave them as a taxpayer anyway, you know. So I think the early homesteaders movement in Lower East Side really tried to have good relations with the police and to keep them out of their business. And as the movement got bigger, and as the confrontations took place here in Tompkins Park, that became impossible. And there came to be a sense of kind of a war zone, of there being two sides, and that the police could not be trusted for anything, and it actually became very dangerous to talk to the police, to take anything they said seriously, to try to negotiate with them, because they would try to trick you. And so we came to a point where you know, we started to see the world in this kind of Zoroastrian universe of like the dark and the light, you know, the police and us, and they're all, you know, evil, they're robots, and for all practical purposes this was true, because, you know, a policeman might be a nice person, but if he's here, you know, in this situation, he's expected to work to fuck you up. That's successful behavior for him, so he's going to. So, you know, whatever you might philosophically think of him as a human being, it's irrelevant to the situation, you know. And that, you know, created a kind of problematic universe, because obviously, you know, one is dependent on police for certain things, one is dependent on police for protection from certain types of people, and so then you have to do that yourself. So that was a hard time for people, I think. I think that people developed a very unusual kind of dialogue with political power, unusual in this country, you know, unusual in, you know, in the process that we normally have here, because there was a sense in which, you know, you can train them by punishing them. I think they had that attitude towards us, and we had that attitude towards them, and it worked. That you could say, okay, police are coming to evict this building. Somebody throws bags of cement from the top floor to the street. Next time the police are asked to evict a building, they're going to ask the city to get their paperwork in line first, because they don't want to be in that situation. And that process progressed over a series of years, where essentially anytime there was an eviction, activists punished the city for that with lawsuits, with confrontation in the street, with bad press, with civil disobedience, with actual violence, that they raised the stakes of doing that. And the result was that at a certain point, the city said, okay, there are 13 more buildings left. It's not worth what we're going to go through to evict them, so let's cut a deal with these folks. And, you know, that's a way of getting changes in society that is not taught to you in your civics classes, but it actually works. It actually got people something. Yeah, I think with the economic crisis in the United States, there's the opportunity for a lot of people to try new ways of living and organizing themselves. You have an enormous amount of abandonment of property going on all over the country, and it's just obvious that somebody is going to do something with that. And I suspect that it will be done by people who are concerned about the welfare of the low-income communities that have been already forced out of those buildings. I think it will primarily be done for economic reasons. I don't think it will be ideological in nature. I think it'll be driven by necessity. I think that political activism, which is connected to some material thing that has to be accomplished in the here and now in the immediate environment, is much different than political activism, which is attached to an issue, to, you know, a bill in front of Congress or a faraway situation. I think there's a completely different sense and a completely different toolkit for dealing with it. I think that political activism, which is attached to people's immediate material concerns, is far more powerful. I think that people, I have Tobocman's first rule of politics. Everyone is an anarchist when it comes to their own ass. That everyone thinks they should be free, they should be housed, they should have the best of what's available with as few hassles, and that they will do the right thing with that freedom. They're not so sure when it comes to somebody else. And because of that, when you're organizing people around their own interests, they will really move. They will really do things. Whereas if you're organizing people around some abstract influence of someone somewhere else, no matter how good your cause is, there's a certain anemic quality to what comes out of it. And I think that the American left has been really crippled. I guess these are bad words, right? But the American left has been really damaged by its obsession with problems in foreign countries. Not that you don't need an analysis of what goes on in Mexico or an analysis of what goes on in Africa or the Middle East, but in the end, you can't really organize a community around what goes on in another country. You have to organize them around what's happening to them, and then they will have very definite opinions, real openness to conversation, because the facts are really necessary for them. I mean, you know this because you know the difference between, say, American Zionists and people in Israel. That American Zionists have all kinds of odd and idealized notions about the situation, whereas people in Israel, whatever their political positions, know what they're talking about and are concerned about the practical reality. So I think that you know, the neighborhood movement that existed here, the squatters movement, the movement to end the curfew in Tompkins Park, the movements to save rent stabilization, the movements to save the community garden, the movements against police brutality, the movement to get adequate services to people with AIDS, these have a lot of power because the people who are active in them are genuinely the constituents of their own movement. They are acting to improve their conditions. And I think that the future of the American left is going to be in doing more things like this, particularly as the economic situation and the ecological situation are deteriorating.